together. Adoption brings our worlds together. Adoption brings our worlds together. Come and share with me. Adoption brings our worlds together. Adoption brings our worlds together. Adoption brings our worlds together. Come and share with me. Share with me.
Welcome to the Journey to Josiah Podcast. I am your host, David Marshall, founder and CEO of Journey to Josiah Incorporated. I am excited to have as my guest, Nelda Hunt. Nelda is a certified social worker and biological mother of 3 with a passion for adoption. For years, she served as an adoption professional who supports and assists women in making adoption plans for their unborn children. Nelda is the author of A Loving Choice, a story about open adoption. The book was written to educate young readers about open adoption and to help them become more aware of adoption scenarios that exist today. Let me just put a tag note in this. I would say that it also goes beyond helping young readers, but it helps those of us adults process and understand it as well. So I want to give that tag that it's beneficial to both young and old. It also brings attention to the selfless sacrifice. Pay attention to that word sacrifice birth parents make when choosing adoption. I'm going to go back to sacrifice while raising awareness of extended family ties created through open adoption. Nelda, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me on today. How are you doing this morning?
I cannot complain on this good cloudy Saturday morning in Maryland. Is it looking a little better in Louisiana?
No, it's pretty much the same. Same
Okay.
here as well.
We got the clouds everywhere. All right.
Yeah.
That's all
it's
right.
putting a damper on our Mardi Gras season here.
Is it Mardi Gras season now?
Yes, carnival season. Yes, it is. Mardi Gras is on Tuesday, February 13th for us. And so we've been celebrating for the past couple of weeks now. Yep.
You all shut down the world when that happens. Any of y'all going to work? Any of y'all do anything productive?
We're definitely doing something productive, but we do shut down and we celebrate and we party and we have a good time. Yep. So Tuesday I'm off and we're going to enjoy the festivities of Mardi Gras.
So wait, what part of Louisiana? You're in Baton Rouge, right?
Yes, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Mm-hmm.
So I always associated just with New Orleans. So is this all over Louisiana that Mardi Gras is celebrated?
It's pretty much almost like a statewide thing. I would say like the more southern part of the state, we do party and we do the Mardi Gras probably more so than the northern part of the state.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Good information for me to know. I need to make my way back.
And visit. Yes, come down and visit soon.
Look, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna leave part of it out because it might be TMI. We'll have to talk about that off the recording. Okay. But when I went, a dear friend who's like a big sister to me, she was in the touring Color Purple, and and she's from New Orleans. And so, of course, when the show actually opened here in Maryland, which was amazing, and then when it went to New Orleans, I'm like, oh, I got to go down there because all her family's there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a foodie like there is none other, in particular seafood. I don't think that my jaws stopped flapping the entire weekend. So much so, and this is no exaggeration, that in a weekend, I gained 7 pounds in one weekend. I wasn't there a few months. I was there a weekend, and I went with my nice fitted little jeans. Nothing was buttoning. And so I had to pull shirts out. It led to some other complications I'll talk about.
Yeah, just some little stretch pants. Yeah, and I'm gonna be honest with you. So just like a month ago or so, I did something very similar. I had a weekend in New Orleans for my birthday and did some self-care and just like touring of various restaurants that I would see on social media. I'm like, hey, this is a 30-minute drive. Let me take a weekend and go. And I created my own food tour. It was great. So I understand what you mean. Even, me living locally, I don't have
Mm-hmm.
opportunities to just kind of frequent all the restaurants because it's so many, but the food is so good. We enjoyed the charbroiled oysters. We enjoyed the shrimp po' boys. All of that. So I just had to make my way down there and just have a moment of like, look, let me take this all in and indulge.
I'm
And that's
having
what I
another
did for
moment.
my birthday. Yeah.
Oh Lord. I'm having a
And
whole
if
nother
and
moment.
you know what, and maybe I'm gonna look into this, but if you want, I could send you and Josiah king cake. We could probably ship that. It's king cake season as well. Yeah.
No, they
Just
don't do
give it
things
some
like
thought.
that. Because then I'm gonna tell you that was my breakfast. I normally ate normal breakfast. That was my breakfast along with, and I don't drink coffee, but if someone pours Bailey's in it, because I'd never had
Yes,
that,
yes, yes, yes.
it was king
Signature.
cake.
It's
And
a signature.
that's why I was jacked up. So who's drinking in the morning?
You cannot
So
have coffee without Bailey's now. It'll change your life.
it changed mine. So I started the day tipsy with cake. So I just, oh, yeah, it was amazing.
It's
So
an
I got,
experience. Yes, right.
well, when I came back, I behaved myself. I was like, look, the complication I had the first time, we're not doing this again. And
No,
everybody knew
thank you.
about it. It was
Yeah.
hilarious. But oh Lord, that kink, yeah.
I
Okay.
love that. Yeah. I love it. It's
Ooh.
the culture. New Orleans is something, I mean, it's totally different experience. Won't get it anywhere else in the world.
No, no, not at all. And the people, because I'm a Southern fanatic in that there's just a graciousness.
Yeah.
And we don't have that in Maryland. I'll just
Mhm.
leave that there.
Mhm.
So let's dig in. I reached out to you via Instagram. So this is the other side note on that. I always feel I'm always nervous doing something like that because you always hear the people talking about the people who, as they say, slid into the, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, so I'm uber self-conscious, even though like you just see Journey to Josiah, not a male face there, but I'm uber self-conscious because I'm like, I really don't want anyone to think
Yeah.
that I am trying to be to the left here.
Uh-huh.
But what drew me, and I don't even know how we started following each other, but what drew me particularly to you and the work that you do is you do a lot around supporting birth parents, and I want to just say mothers, parents in
Mhm.
this adoption process. And as you know, as I've told you, I feel like birth mothers, birth parents, I keep saying mother, we'll clarify that in a second, but
Mhm.
I feel like birth parents are vilified. I feel like there are many misconceptions. And so to connect with someone who is really pouring her heart out into the work of supporting birth parents was very, very special to me. So so I want to ask you what really was the call towards birth parents? Because the adoption world is broad and there's so many different ways that one can work in this world. But what was the pull to the birth parents?
Oh, good question. And so initially in this work, and I don't know if you, Fred, or just, but I'll share, is that I started out basically doing the tail end of adoption work, which looked like just finalizing
Okay.
reports to have it, the final decree portion of it within the court systems. And then I moved to the private sector where we facilitated private adoptions. And so that looked like more of matching, supporting of the prospective adoptive parents, and just kind of having them to feel secured in what their decision was in terms of like, I want to grow my family through this. And so just doing that. And then ultimately hearing the stories of what birth parents had to say about what drew them to adoption and why, um, this was just more, it was just the ultimate decision that they had to make, in terms of not being able to parent a child and just empathizing with that as a mother,
Mm-hmm.
just because I felt I connected more that way, I guess, with the birth parent, because it's just the decision and what this looks like. And right now, I'm just not in position, and me having some of those sentiments at some point in my life where it's like, okay, I have this child, so I understand what this birth parent is going through to a certain degree. And just connect them more in that end, I would say, and wanting to support their decision and find the most appropriate parent after hearing what they have poured out to me, and relating to that as a mother as well. I think is what really drew me and connected me with that woman, and birth parent, so to say, throughout the whole process.
And within that, when they when when you are in the picture, have they how would you say, have they finalized the decision to go ahead with the adoption, or are you kind of in the beginning where you're really going through a therapeutic process on really helping them to um, weigh the option of the adoption or parenting? Does that question make sense?
I think, and so this will be my answer to that, and you can correct me if I, have just not answering what you're looking for.
Hmm.
But it's therapeutic the entire way through. It's
Okay.
initially just a conversation that's followed by the thought that birth mom wanted to reach out and inquire, right? And
Hmm.
so from there, it's just basically guidance and what this would look like if you choose to proceed, and that's all the way to baby, even after baby's born,
Okay.
because birth parents have the right to change their mind.
Yeah.
There's no commitment or anything even after matching. You can be marriage matched with a family and still have the option to change your mind. So the work that we do is where we're counseling and we're answering these questions, and we're supporting this birth parent and having her to be to a place to where, okay, this is what I ultimately want to do based upon her decision. There's
Hmm.
no coercion or any part of it involved. It's truly just supporting the intent that she had and off that inquiry, and
Hmm.
wanting to go through with this, if she so well choose so. But it's ultimately her decision, even
Hmm.
after baby is born. Okay,
Hmm.
does that answer
Oh,
the gist of?
perfectly. And
Mhm.
you went even further than I was even thinking, and I'm glad, because there are some other misconceptions, and I tread a real fine line in terms of how I even discuss certain things, because what we do know is there's trauma involved, right, for the birth parent and the adoptee. And so I'm always trying to be cautious of language that I'm using. But to that end, though, I get a lot of, or see a lot of information from adoptees that are those who, I would say, I'll just put it this way, struggle with this whole adoption thing. So for them, there was something that was just horrid to them. I don't know what
Mhm.
it was, but with that, I think sometimes they have, I don't believe intentionally, said certain things that lend itself to a misconception of the adoption world altogether. And one of those main things is that agencies are basically forcing birth parents to give up their children for some kind of financial gain. And
Mhm.
that is the thing that, on my end, as an adoptive parent, having heard certain things like that, and people saying, well, yeah, you all brought babies,
Mhm.
it's then that lends itself to a certain kind of trauma for me, because I'm like, that's not true. But I'm
Yeah.
glad you said that, because I think that people don't understand that it's not final when the birth mother walks into that door or has that phone call or however they connect. It
Yeah.
is a journey. Let me ask you, so in the state of Maryland, for instance, birth parents have a 30-day window after they have signed over their rights to then what is the word? There's a word for that. Why is the word
Mhm.
eluding me? But basically, they can, after they have signed, and they have 30 days to change their mind, if they will. That's not the word I'm thinking. Is
Irrevocable.
there a revoke? Yes.
Revocation period. So here, in the way we do it, upon signing, and because what happens is in that part of the process is birth parent will meet with her attorney aside. It's no affiliation to any agency, adopted parent, no one. This is a person who's going to represent birth parent. Okay. And so he would go through the surrender paperwork. He or she, their attorney, would go through the surrender paperwork, those documents, read it with the birth parent, ask a whole host of questions. Have you been promised anything? Do you understand that you're doing this with, free intent? And just to make sure that there's no coercion there or anything, that nothing has been promised. And birth parent at that point would confirm or deny that, right? And so
Wow.
usually what that looks like is, yes, this was my decision. This was something that I wanted to do after proper counseling and proper education and just understanding what this means, because the terminology is a lot of big words, right? So the average person would understand what, irrevocable means, or like, just execution of voluntary surrendering parental rights, and just covering those bases. And so they would meet with their attorney, usually before signing, for 30 to an hour, whatever it takes, just to ensure that this is what the birth parent wants to do. And this is just me painting the scenario to give a visual of what this looks like. Once that's done, they usually sign something with their attorney, their legal counsel, and then all parties come together. So that looks like staff within the agency. Usually there's a licensed clinical social worker there to acknowledge that she did the pre-surrender counseling for birth parents, to know that, okay, this was her intent, was her sole decision to place her child for adoption. And then we all sign and have witnesses, and everyone's there. Is usually recorded. It just depends on what the process is for the agency. And that's just in case later down the line, someone, was to say, if someone wants to say, well, I didn't understand what I was doing at that time.
Okay.
And that's just like a little security to help, because at this point, baby is now placed with adoptive family. But that's just, like I said, it's more of like security for all parties. And it's just, in that moment, it paints a picture of what's going on. You can hear conversations, you hear everything in the room. And like I said, if it ever gets to that point, but usually brave parents are pretty secure in their decision, especially at that point, to say, okay, this is my intent and this is what I want to do. I'm voluntarily placing my child for adoptive placement.
That's good to know that it's also reinforced by by legal counsel as well, because even
With
I've
no
never
affiliation to
with
anyone,
the
no
agency.
agency. Yeah,
Okay.
it's just like if it was almost, just think of it in a situation of like a court appointed type of thing. You are being represented by someone who has no affiliation with the agency whatsoever.
Okay.
And if you choose to, and we have had situations where birth parents like, oh, well, I've changed my mind. And then that legal party would have to go back and explain, well, when we were here, this is what just to have that conversation, and then give options of what it looks like if you choose to contest, and like what the likeliness is. So solely representing that individual. Yes.
Okay. That's really, really good. So I wanna go back a little bit into what it looks like. What is kind of that initial conversation when a birth mother or birth parents, and I keep saying that, and let me clarify. We tend to lean in more to birth mothers because that's a lot of the scenario that we typically see. I'm assuming you would see the same.
Yeah, usually it's sometimes just the mom.
Yeah.
Sometimes the birth parent, the birth father is unknown in
Mm-hmm.
most situations. And it's not uncommon to have a birth mother there alone because of whatever the backstory is, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I I get where you're going with it. Yeah.
And I always get annoyed with myself when I do it because one, I'm a father. I'm always like,
Mhm.
fathers are always left out of the deal.
Yeah.
And then, in my own personal journey, their birth father was very involved. So,
Yeah.
I get agitated with myself for leaving that part out. But so take me to that when birth mom, birth parents come in to have this kind of initial conversation. What does that look like?
Oh, goodness. I mean, there are so many response. I mean, I could definitely so many explanations I could provide, but I will say that most of the time, not all the time, most of the time, there's work done before they've even picked up the phone to call. They've had a discussion, a conversation amongst themselves. So, like, hey, these are our options. Let's call this place and get clarity if we want to proceed with adoption. Let's see if what they're saying is aligning with what our beliefs are, right? And so sometimes you'll find that birth parents have done their own research. Thanks to
Hmm.
social media now, there are different groups where birth parents support birth parents, and they're sharing their experiences. And there's so much that they can research now about the adoption process. So
Hmm.
I find that they have some knowledge about adoption and what this looks like. But I think, and so by the time they reach us, it's just basically us confirming or denying whatever they're asking or what they're wanting to hear.
Hmm.
And so I think too, and what you will find is that now birth parents have the option to work with multiple agencies, and so they don't, and a lot of them they do that and until they ultimately decide which one they want. So
Okay.
they may call and inquire with one agency, and if they don't like something there, well, let me call and inquire with another agency, even thereafter doing paperwork. And sometimes that's where it gets messy, because we do have situations where even here where we've seen birth parents have enrolled in another program, but ultimately choose to place with another agency. On at the latter part of the pregnancy. So it just really totally depends on the birth parent and how
Hmm.
transparent they will be in the process, their
Okay.
integrity. Yeah, but I mean, because it's just options. So of course, I
Hmm.
want to. And it may be if it's a pool of where this agency didn't have a birth parent in particularly that I like, and instead of properly withdrawing from the program, they would maybe just continue to be enrolled but not place their child. So it just
I
fairly
got what
depends.
you're saying. And with that, for a birth parents that could potentially be listening, what would you say is something that they should look for in an agency when making this decision, because we are in a space now where a lot of ethical things are being brought into question. Well, not just now, it's always been the case. I think now it's
Yeah.
just kind of being addressed more in terms of federal legislation. But what is something that you feel that birth parents should be looking for in terms of a safe space for them? Because at this point, what I want to drive home is really supporting birth parents in this
Mm-hmm.
process.
And wow. Let's see. And I because I don't really know how other agencies what their process looks like, but I will just
Hmm.
share my thoughts of what I would be. There are agencies that do not require any upfront money from any prospective adoption parents to support the birth parents' expenses while in the program. Okay. I think for me, because if I were a birth parent and I changed my mind, I would want to know that the family did not have to pay anything until I made a sound decision, right?
Okay.
I think for me, that's what I would want to know that okay, I'm not putting a family in jeopardy of losing or affording and putting up money prior to me knowing for sure if I'm going to make a placement. Whereas so some adoption agencies, they afford those expenses. They pay those costs. They solely support their birth parents without asking any adoptive parents for any type of funding.
Okay.
And I don't know what that looks like elsewhere. I do know that there are some agencies where private, I guess, and I guess this would look like on more of a private standpoint that's not an agency, where some adoptive parents, they do pay like retainers and they put money into an account to support their birth parent. And then birth parent can change their mind, and then that family is just out of that money. And I know that's probably the norm now, but that's just my opinion in the matter. I would probably prefer, because it's like we talked about, it's not done until the signing. And that usually here in the state of Louisiana takes place 3 to 5 days after placement, after baby is born.
Okay. That makes sense. And and I'm kind of sitting here thinking, well, I don't know how. I know there were expenses. I don't know per se if my initial ones were helping to support a birth parent or birth parents, because one, I'm just in the beginning of the process, so there's not one identified birth parent. Right? So I don't know, but that's a good point.
So there are like application fees. Are you talking about
Yes,
that?
there are
Like, well, okay,
definitely
yeah.
those.
So that's just standard. Those are required. So that probably got you into your program, right? Okay, and so that's normal. But so sometimes after, let's just say, a birth parent is matched with a family, I have seen where, okay, at that point, the prospective adoptive parents immediately take on those birth mother expenses at that point at matching. And then what will happen is, if 2 to 3 months down the line, this birth parent says, okay, I decided to parent, then that prospective adoption parents, they're out of money at that point.
And would potentially have to do that all over again.
All over again. That's what the process looks like. Yeah. Ooh. And that's the risk that most prospective adoptive parents they face with adoption. Yeah.
Ooh. Wow.
And so that's why my preference would be because you have the parent has the right to change their mind, even after baby is born. And that's why, knowing that, I would prefer to work with an agency where, if I did change my mind, my prospective adoptive parents, they're not out of anything. They're just next in line to be matched with another birth parent. Yeah. That would be my preference. And like I said, that's how things are done here with certain agencies that I'm familiar with. And so, but I guess it just all depends on what the procedures and protocols are with the private agency or together, the adopting agency. Yep.
What are some of the fears that birth parents often express when they have these conversations with you?
Oh, I mean, oh goodness, I think the one that is most common is the thought of like what the child will think after they find out that they are adopted. Is this child going to resent me? Is this child going to hate me? Or, what I think that's usually the most common one. And then we look into situations where you have a family or siblings involved, right? You sometimes like, what if my child at home, what if you think I'm going to place her too? Or if she's going to be placed for adoption. So it's a combination of different questions that usually come into play in the beginning. And that's where, throughout the process, you will see where birth parents are usually counseled. And they're counseled more than once. They're counseled throughout the process, just to kind of help with the reassurance of certain things and what this could potentially look like, and to maybe give speaking points to birth parents if they want to have this initial conversation with their children.
And when you go to, because I want to dig into both of those scenarios. So when you deal with the birth parent who worries about resentment, how do you support them through that?
Well, and so we definitely, without a doubt, we're gonna validate that, right? Their feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and because potentially that could be what happens, but
Mm-hmm.
you want to try and give reassurance and offer different type of interventions to help with that, to alleviate that worry. And so what we usually do or have done is where if a birth parent, she expresses that, okay, well, let's are you comfortable at this point maybe writing a letter that child could open and have and give to adoptive parents to keep for this child so they can know
Mm.
why you made this decision and what this looks
Mm-hmm.
like at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some ways we support that. Then there are some times where we do we have where we would keep a file to say, okay, birth parent has expressed that if the child has questions, pick up and contact me. I'm happy to
Mm-hmm.
later down the line, if it's what I'm saying, I'm happy to have this conversation or do whatever, so we
Mm-hmm.
give options to that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, just with therapy and just counseling and just supporting those needs and just the questionings of that is just the typical of what we usually do when those type of questions arise.
And you brought up another scenario in the beginning, and this deals with birth parents who are already parenting. And really, this goes very much in line with your own book.
Hmm.
Again, A Loving Choice, a story about open adoption, and being able to help your your children that you're parenting understand and navigate this. And so when it comes to that, because I can only imagine th- the fears probably also, as you kind of said, of the children that are being parented, and then a birth parent who's also trying to navigate and process this. So when working with them in terms of their children, how do you support that?
Oh goodness, yeah. And thanks for mentioning the book, and really and truly, the book was a combination of just that question, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with so many birth parents and mothers who are already parenting to where they will often pose the question of like, how do I have this conversation with the children at home? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's ultimately how I came to create this resource
Yeah.
to kind of help with speaking points and just navigating that conversation. Because they're gonna ask, the children gonna recognize that mommy's belly is growing, and I know that that's a baby, and what does this look? And so usually birth parents, they struggle with just having that initial conversation, like and wanting to tell the child, but then not wanting to tell, so they're conflicted. And so but knowing it's a conversation that sometimes needs to be had. And so um goodness, this book is a resource for that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so and then repeat the other part of your question because it's just lost.
Um, right. And see, in my age group, sometimes those things fly out of my head.
Yeah.
Um, and well, I think pretty much you answered it, because really it was dealing with how you support the birth parent in terms of even having this kind of conversation.
With the children.
Um, have you ever had any situations where you have also had to support the siblings that the birth parent is currently parenting?
Um, I don't believe I have not particularly. I have witnessed where we had not really. I can't say personally that I have had
Okay.
any, no.
Okay. Yeah, just I just was wondering in that, because that is a very emotional conversation to have, and then having them to also understand, as you've written, that that's still your sibling, be it brother, sister, and and how that can look in the long term, even though they're not here with us, but
Mhm.
that's still very much your sibling. And I think it also lends itself to the same kind of conversation with a birth parent, because they still need to be recognized as the
Mhm.
parent, right? It's the
Mhm.
same, kind of the same scenario. And is that something that you find birth parents struggle to navigate? Is this whole who am I in this whole scenario?
Mhm. Yeah, and so I do find that most birth parents they are comfortable in their decision and they're still parent and they
Mm-hmm.
recognize that,
Mm-hmm.
but when they are secure in the decision to place the child, they are undoubtedly they're confident enough to say no, such and such is your mommy, even at visits and these reunification visits and these meetings, and you're still mom. I am first mom, and that's fine. I know this without a
Mm-hmm.
doubt, but this is still mom. So I don't think I mean, I don't find that there's usually a whole, so much of a dilemma with who is mother or who's
Okay.
recognized as superior parent. I don't, I
Okay.
never,
That's good.
especially when you find some that are secure within their placement, right? When the intent is there and this is completely voluntarily and this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I find comfort in knowing that I've made a decision and this is your mommy, this is your parent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mhm.
That's good to know. I've often, because even when I had my own personal conversation, just kind of navigating what that looks like in terms of the open adoption itself. And actually, we keep saying this, or I keep saying it rather. Can you explain what open adoption is? And I think it looks different, but can you kind of give a little bit of
Mhm.
context to what that is?
Yeah, and so it does look different, and but truly, openness it's just it's open, right? The birth child, the sorry, birth parent, adoptive parents, everyone is aware of their role in the matter.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to have visits and frequent together as an extended family, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it could be where it's like, let's just say we have an agreement to where we're going to meet up twice a year. We do that, and at some point we appropriately start introducing and acknowledging who is who and what the role may be. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe starting off with a child, just a newborn. Okay, this is mom, and this is what we agreed. We're gonna meet with her. She is
Mm-hmm.
still birth mother. She is this, and we're gonna honor that commitment. And then as the child continues to grow, I have seen where it's a first name basis, right? Hi, this
Okay.
is Miss Such and Such, and then and then hey, so Miss Such and Such, she really is her, and so we've
Mm-hmm.
seen that in just the work that we do, to where it's like you're appropriately adding the layers to where it's
Okay.
now recognizable for the child, because that's the part of having it open, and no,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be no doubt or any concerns as to, oh, this is, later, to where it's like the confusion aspects usually try to come into play. And I think that's what happens with most adoptees. They're just not, the transparency is not there. So when they do find out, all of those things that you discussed initially starts to come to play.
I like that the idea of the layers, because it is a lot to take in. It definitely probably depending on age of
Yeah.
the child too. So being able to process that. Um, when it comes to so we're dealing with the open adoption process, and it looking different for everyone. What What are your experiences with those who have said, I really just need to step away from this?
hmm And sometimes it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, because usually that's the part that we're not gonna know.
Yeah.
We're not gonna know what caused them to pull back. But what
Mm-hmm.
we do know and what we try to support is that when they're ready to pick up where they left off, you leave a space for that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because life maybe have gotten hard in a moment or a season to where it's like, okay, I know she's fine, and and this, but I need time to heal or go through and experience whatever I have going on in this moment that I don't want to transfer into this good thing in this situation. So you do see
Mm.
fluctuate where sometimes birth parents there will be a decline even with an open adoption, and sometimes there's not, but you want to leave a space to where it's okay, when you come back, communicate with me. Let me know what's going on. Are you fine? Are you happy? Is this something that you want to continue to do? And you navigate that amongst yourselves. And that's another thing. Open adoptions have a little bit of, they have more contact, direct contact, than what you will find with one that's semi-open versus your closed adoptions.
Okay. Okay. So would you say semi-open is more just the picture, and maybe email or so kind of
Yeah,
contact?
yeah, and less on the in-person visits or, those
Mm-hmm.
type of personal things. Yeah, that was more of like the semi-open. Usually, sometimes a third party is involved. Like it could be your agency or your social worker who
Mm-hmm.
would, disperse pictures and things of that matter. But yes, that would be where it's like more of a mediator is there in that.
And so in this, there's a grieving process, right?
Yes.
For birth parents in general. And and I'm sure with stages of grief, right, it looks different for everyone. Um, and just throwing out, not that you'd be in the mind of all birth parents, but um, it seems like the part of the grieving process may dictate that birth parent says, just not right now. I need
Mhm.
this minute to heal. And speak to that. And I say that because, again, I want people to understand that there are so many layers to this.
Mhm.
And the ultimate outcome of this whole conversation is that when we are thinking of birth parents, we are still acknowledging them as parents, as human with emotions who loved, and we're going to get to one particular word in a little bit, but
Yeah.
talk to that a little bit more in terms of that grief and maybe in some of the ways it may manifest itself.
Yeah. And so, I mean, all of what you said, David, is true. That process is the most significant, I think, like in the throughout the whole process, because it
Mm-hmm.
could, I mean, the onset is just almost, it could start right when that phone call is made to inquire, because
Mm,
you have to, because a lot of times it's like the back and forth, the bargaining aspect of that grief, right? Okay, I know I need to do this. I'm not in a position to parent this child, but I love this child and I want to. But you, at some point, the want just kind of, the need outweighed that want, right? And so
mm,
it starts, or the onset could start early. And so what you find is that even throughout the process, the matching, everything, there's still the grief moment that is there, because you're going to be angry. I've seen situations where sometimes birth parents get angry that the person that they've chose to parent their child is in a better position than they are at that time. And so that you
wow.
get to be angry, but they're happy and they're this is what they want, but they still are human and they're gonna feel those emotions just as the next person. Okay. And then you move forward to the birth. And I'm doing this and I'm happy. I'm a mom. I've birthed my child, just to hand it over to the adoptive parents. The depression
Mm-hmm.
setting in, right? Okay. The denial, like you just, all of those stages are going to be very relevant throughout this whole process. Even at the signing where I know I'm voluntarily doing this with the best intent for my child. I'm doing this for my child.
Mm-hmm.
I've accepted it, but I'm still angry. I want to parent, but I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do see this throughout the whole process. Like I said, even at the beginning of the phone call to the end of placement, and even thereafter. That's why most agencies have now gotten on board with offering ongoing counseling for birth parents even after placement.
Mm-hmm.
There's a need for it.
Yeah.
If we go back to the book, the same I think could apply for, and it does apply, where you'll see what the birth mom in this book and how she's educating her child and giving examples of, so she can understand what this process, the grief process, will look like. You may feel happy, you're happy
Yes.
now, or you may feel sad. But I'm gonna give you an example of, remember when we moved to this new town and you had to leave
Mm-hmm.
your friend behind, what that felt like. That was mom giving the child, or for instance, of like the stages of grief that she probably would experience with losing a sibling, because it's a family loss at that point, not just for mom, but for the sisters too and the brothers as well. And so it's just an ongoing part of the process that birth parents tend to experience, and everyone involved. Grandma who's aware that my child is a replacement, I'm losing a grandchild. So a lot of times, and what I always try to encourage, or just in a lot of times, they birth parents don't have support. But when you find some that do have support, you encourage them to lean on that,
Okay.
because everyone doesn't have that. Everyone's not going to have someone to support them outside the agency. A lot of times, we have women who come to us who tell no one. No one knows what she's doing. And so the agency is definitely stepping in and supporting her, but it's best to have someone that you know on a personal level if you
Yeah.
have that opportunity. So, I mean, you see it throughout, David, the entire
Mhm.
process. You do.
I think the part that you said that really kind of jarred me a bit is the anger when it comes to the prospective adoptive parent. And I get it. I could even see it, and tying in with resentment as well, because you're able to do something that at this juncture I
I can't.
cannot. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, real and real, and I think too, and even if, like, I know that you have someone I had before where she had placed a child, but then thereafter she was in a better position and she had a family and
Mm-hmm.
all those things, and she spoke to what that felt like at the moment. And what
Mm-hmm.
we know about life is that sometimes we go through things just for a season,
Mm.
and you overcome that. And so it's like I think that kind of would apply somewhat to that. It's like in that moment I was not able to, and I felt everything that the average person would, who's in a position to where it's like I can't do something, but I have a strong desire to, but just right now I can't. So I'm gonna feel angry. I'm gonna feel sad. I'm gonna feel all these things that go along with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to be positive and know that, you know, there will be good that's going to come somewhere along those lines. There's going to be good in every, you have to find the beauty in every situation. And
Mm-hmm.
for adoption, I think that's where the sacrifice is made.
The word. That's the word. Yeah.
Sacrifice is made. And even to, like you said, the sacrifice on adoptive parents to where they experience the same stages of grief when they've tried to have a child of their own, and they're unsuccessful. What are my
Mm-hmm.
next options? I have
Mm-hmm.
to accept that, okay, this is not going to work the way I thought it would. Let me explore my options. Then you have adoption. Oh, I've given it some thought. This may be something that could work for me. They go through the same stages of grief just as the average person. So it's on both ends. You're going to experience on both ends.
Wow.
It's on both sides.
That's a huge point to bring up. I think, being a male who who went through the adoption process, I didn't have many options, right? I
Yeah,
mean, I could have done surrogacy, but I also don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I didn't, for me personally, there was never a grief for me simply because I always knew that I was going to adopt. But then when we have the bigger conversation around when we are dealing with prospective adoptive mothers and some of the reasons why they may have gone that route, I can see that because there are a variety of scenarios. And um, yeah,
So the
so
single male that you speaking to for yourself compared to the couple who is, they're doing everything by the book. They've done everything in the way in which they should, just to try, and they're unsuccessful.
mhm, yeah,
That, yeah.
that's that's huge. And
This,
I think right now too, and this is why I think it's so wonderful that we're in the season now and our in this where we are now in terms of adoption
mhm.
and the conversation that in particular women are allowed to have, because so much was hidden so many years ago,
Yeah, yeah.
because who was going to say at that point in time that maybe there was a fertility issue there? Who was going to say that? Because we consider, and we still hear it now, when couples get married, you still hear somebody at, oh, so when are you going to have a baby? When you,
Yeah.
and that's just, and these are well-meaning questions, but at the same time, I think people of a certain generation don't take into consideration that there could be a
There are
reason.
struggles. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
who's going to want to sit there and have that kind of conversation when they're trying to grapple with it themselves and don't know exactly where they're going,
What's go-
what route they're
Yeah.
going to take.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
And
huge.
it's ongoing because too, even if that person is, in that moment of where the denial aspect of the grief, if someone is in one ear asking me, you've been married for this long, when are y'all gonna have a baby?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, well, we've been trying, but I don't want anyone to know. And she's secretly in that, well, is it something wrong with me? Is it something wrong with him? And they're going through those stages and trying to figure this out and navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of answering that question. You get it? Like
Yeah.
it's definitely there. And so really what you said is like the world is getting to a point where so many people are they ask questions unknowingly. They don't know
Mm-hmm.
what the backstory looks like or what is happening inside those person's home.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that there are options, but it still takes a point of understanding and just and where the transparency comes in to say, okay, well, maybe I need to explore something different if I want this to work.
Yeah.
If I want to have a family and I know that I'll try this, what are my other options? Just as you said.
When going back to the birth, and I don't know if this is something that's even been a conversation you've had, but is there, and even if you haven't, maybe you can speak to it.
Mm-hmm.
We said that this is really, I would call it the ultimate in my own way of thinking. I mean, when we think
Mm-hmm.
about the ultimate sacrifice, we always think about it in terms of Jesus and him dying and that being the ultimate, you gave your life. But
Mm-hmm.
what we know that's really not something that any of us are doing, saving souls or washing sins
Yeah.
away. But
Yeah.
so in this, to me, it seems like the ultimate sacrifice. How then do we turn this around so that the birth mother or birth parents are then celebrated?
Mm-hmm. Good question. Mm-hmm. Because what we know is what they're doing is something that most people, at the drop of a dime, if you ask them to pick one of their own children to place, right? They couldn't
Mm-hmm.
do it. They
No.
couldn't do it. They couldn't pick. How can you pick?
Mm-hmm.
So just in that, knowing that it takes a certain amount of strength and bravery, right?
Yeah.
It takes a committed person to say and just to be accountable within themselves. I'm doing this for this reason. Birth parents, to me, are top tier,
Yeah. Absolutely.
without a doubt,
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't to make such a decision.
Yeah.
It's selfless.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard this person's story. I've heard this couple's story, and I chose them. I
Mm-hmm.
want them,
Mm-hmm.
no one else. To get to that point after the birth parent has first made the decision, right? They deserve to be celebrated.
Yeah.
No questions asked. And so I think what we need to do as a community, we have to support and we have to continue to acknowledge their
Mm-hmm.
efforts and the things that they've done, because it deserves just like the utmost respect, right?
Yeah.
It is something that selfless.
Yeah.
You can think about your experience, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
process and what that looks like. And I know you and I have talked about that in those first moments of meeting Josiah and how instantly you gravitated towards him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you take a step back and you look at this woman who birthed this baby,
Yeah.
and she handed you see. So it's like how, and why are we not acknowledging them in the way that we do everything else that we find
Mm.
glory in?
That's
So that
huge.
yeah.
That is huge because you said something so that resonates with me because I've often said the same thing, after the birth mother has made this very challenging decision, and then they look to the adoptive parent and say, I choose you.
Mm-hmm.
with the best of me.
Yeah, all of me.
That is not
All of me. Yeah.
little. And
No,
I
no.
find that to be, as a dad, even that weighs that gives this my responsibility to my child even more. It I kind of, it puts an additional pressure. Like, we all as parents
Yeah,
want
yeah.
our children to be the greatest, and we want to give them the best life possible. But because there were birth parents who chose you to do
Mhm,
it,
mhm,
it's like I can't let them. I think about them all of the
mhm,
time
mhm.
because
I
I
can't
have
let
a
them go.
responsibility to them.
Yeah,
They would, because had they been able to do it, they would have.
they would have, and that's what we know. And that's what we know to be true. And David, and what I know for your situation is that it wasn't birth mom alone making that decision, right?
Exactly.
Two,
Exactly.
two for you.
Yep.
Two parties agreed that you were the better option
Yeah.
for their son. And so that, I mean, in itself is rewarding, and even too, when we see Josiah's life and we know he's living a good life, and that's the reassurance that comes with that, and that's what I want people to see outside of this book that we're talking about, and we'll get to that, but there has to be a part more added to this
Hmm.
process. What does
Hmm.
this look like after placement, right?
No, talk about it. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, and
What does it
because
look like?
you have, yeah, because
Hmm.
it's like now, what is this? What is the perspective of adoptive parents? This is a chapter in their book that they could finally close. They're parenting now. And not
Hmm.
to forget about the birth family, because we're going to cover that too. What does this look like? What are the conversations that have been had after?
Hmm.
And how you navigate that and how you
Hmm.
move along with that. And so, if I can sprinkle now, we're going to talk
Sure.
about the sequel of the book that's going to come after um, the 11 choices story about open adoption. What does this look like when baby didn't come home? Hadn't really
Hmm.
got the title of it yet, but we're going to talk about that process and the ongoing, continuous support that birth parents will have after adoptive placement, and the same of what this looks like for adoptive parents too. So we want to kind of bring it all together to have that openness just shared and kind of just, okay, this is what this process looks like.
Hmm.
There
Hmm.
is a need for it.
Yeah.
The book, my book, and I know there was a need for it, and even too, and was supported by my beta readers who were basically a team of social workers and birth parents. Add this, the world needs to know this. Add this,
Mm.
they need to hear this, they need to see this part of it. And so, and then, and two, in terms of what we said with educating just that group of people, these babies and siblings, to where it's like, now mama said it, Miss Such and Such said it. Now I can go out into the world and recognize this on my own
Hmm.
because I've now been taught and understand this. And because families are not normal and they all look different, I have peers in my classrooms who's also adopted,
Yeah.
just like my baby sister. And she's in
Hmm.
a good home. And so that's what we want to get back to. And I just really felt like that part of the book and part of the story and this journey needs to be talked about. So there will be a
Hmm.
continuation of this first book. So
It's so necessary. It's so necessary. As I've said to you, I'm so protective of birth parents in general,
yeah,
and
you have to be. You
and
have to
how
be.
we need to acknowledge and celebrate them, and and because, and it's so interesting. This is the thing that's so interesting, and not to become uber political, but when we're in a space where I'm trying to think how to say this gingerly,
Mhm.
without imposing too much of me into this. But when we're in a space where we have um, women's rights, because there are rights on both ends, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Taken away,
Mhm.
and then we then in some way, shape, or form, unfortunately, then force their hand into
Mhm.
this. Well,
Mhm.
then we've got to change the narrative in terms of how we are going to view these women, these mothers. You got to change the scenario.
Yeah.
Because again, if you force their hands, then because it's kind of to me what's happening. And I, as a male, take myself out of these scenarios because I have a problem with men making decisions when it comes to things like this. That's just me. But again, if you're gonna force somebody's hand, because everybody is saying, because there is adoption, and this is an amazing, I call it a gift. I do, because it was a gift for me, right? But we have to shift, and language has got to change.
Yeah.
Because then the person who doesn't understand, who comes to the adoptive parent and wants to then dig into that adoptive child's life and what happened to, well, one, it's none of your business, but two, I need you to not approach it from this area of, just, I don't even know what the word is. I feel like the energy has to be changed. The
Absolutely.
energy has to be changed. But one, maybe you shouldn't be prying into these kinds of things. One, but the energy has to be changed. And what do we do systemically to change that energy so that we are recognizing birth parents as the heroes that they are, because they have, that this is the ultimate sacrifice. They made somebody else's dream come true, and their dream had to almost die for someone else's dream, because that was mine. I tell anybody, I had two big dreams, to be an opera singer and a father. And these people made my biggest dream come true. And for them, there had to be a death in a certain kind of way.
Yeah. Oh, it's a loss.
So we got to change the narrative.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's huge. And I'm so happy that, you've written this book. You're writing another part, because I think it will be so necessary to helping to change the narrative
Yeah.
about birth parents, and obviously the whole world of adoption. But it's just a sensitive thing for me.
Yeah.
It just is. And I know, and people have looked at me strange when I said, I immediately was in love with Josiah's birth parents. But to me, how would I not be?
Exactly. Yeah.
I to look at him is to see them, even though, if we're not present with each other, I still see them. I still hear the questions. I still remember the conversation. I still know the emotion. I still know all those things can't. I'm going to tell you this, and this is not to make it about me. There was somewhat of a trauma to me in having to witness this gut-wrenching pain.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
And you
I'm
got to
so
see it.
empathetic. So it hurts.
Yeah. You got to see it. And I think that's why it's so, significant to you, right? Sometimes you have situations where they can't face birth parents, or birth parents can't face adoptive parents, and it's a handoff through another person because they think it's going to help with the closure.
Yeah. Ooh, so heavy. So heavy. Yeah, I done sat here with my tears. But it always is an emotional conversation. I wanted to read, because this really does tie in perfectly. Nelda wrote an amazing dedication in the foreword of her book. And so I'm going to read it. It says, "To birth parents across the world, choosing adoption is the ultimate sacrifice and probably the most selfless thing you'll ever do. The bravery and strength displayed when placing a child for adoption is remarkable and deserves the utmost respect. To adoptive couples across the world, thank you for choosing adoption to grow your family and for committing to always honor the altruistic decision birth parents make when placing a child for adoption. Thank you for recognizing the beauty of adoption." That says it all.
Yeah.
It says it all.
Does.
And
And we need more people to understand that. We need more people to see that. And I hope the takeaways from today's conversation, David, will definitely do that. We
yeah,
have to honor birth parents. We have to
mhm,
get back to that.
yeah,
We need to, because without them, none of this will be possible. We want to respect them. They are commendable, and they deserve it. And so, just as you said, we need to get back to a way in a world to where it's like, without a doubt, we support birth parents and their
mhm,
decisions. We have to.
yeah. It's a must. It is an absolute must. I
Yeah.
can't emphasize it enough. It's like it's a huge mission of mine. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Um, well, I thank you for sharing with us today. Prior to us taping, I said these are ongoing conversations. So to
Yeah.
those who are listening, this isn't a one-time only conversation. One, as you heard, Nelda has a new book that she is working on, and we want to continue to have this conversation because it does lend itself to something that is broader systemically, like I said. So it doesn't end here. So you'll hear more from Nelda, and how we navigate this. The
Yeah.
other piece that I didn't know actually was, um, um, what is it? April. No, yeah, April. Is it April? That we celebrate
No, May.
birth
May.
May.
Hmm.
Okay. So
Birth
it's the
Mother's Day.
weekend before,
No, no, actually, it's the day before.
the day before. Okay. So what
Hmm.
I'm saying, what we're saying, and I'm not saying it, so there is Birth Mother's Day.
It's the Birth Mother's
Um,
Day.
and that is the day before Mother's
Mother.
Day.
Yep.
And for me, just finding this out, I felt like utter trash, but I didn't know. But one thing is for sure, there's going to be a whole bunch said, and I want to see this really expand so that it is something that is recognized,
Yeah.
in a broader way, because we
Yeah.
still are acknowledging birth mothers as mothers, birth fathers as
Father.
fathers.
And that day is significant for that, but I know so many birth parents who also, I mean, they have the right to as well celebrate on Mother's Day because they are indeed that too. So they have
Absolutely.
two special days of their own. And
That's a great way of
that's the
looking
way
at
I
it.
like to, yeah, that's the way I like to look at it for
That's a
sure.
great way. They have two. They deserve it. They
They
deserve that
deserve
and
it.
more.
Yeah.
Um, that's great to know. So again, I thank you for coming and for being able to have this kind of conversation. I didn't know I was going to have moments. I should know myself now, but
Yeah. I
who
enjoyed
knows?
it. I enjoyed the conversation, David. I did. And thank you for having me. And I look
Absolutely.
forward to the next conversation and being back on your show.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Mhm.
Most definitely. So, my friends, thank you all for tuning in today, and I hope you got something. I know you had to. I'm going to say it. I know you got something. If you want more information on Nelda and how to find her book, I'm going to place her website in the description, but can you tell us what the website is?
Yeah, it's Nelda H Creates. And then it's the same as my IG profile, Instagram profile, Nelda H Creates. And you'll find more information about the book as well as adoption centered journals that I have available. One that actually acknowledges birth parents, and the cover reads "One Amazing Birth Mother." And so, yeah, and so definitely the page is there. If you want to reach out and just have any general questions about anything that we mentioned on here today, feel free to do so. And just look forward to connecting with all of you all.
Absolutely. And so I'll make sure I put the IG there as well.
Mhm.
Um, and so, as it is my custom, my wonderful listeners, always remember adoption changes lives and brings worlds together. I look forward to talking to you the same time, same place next Friday. Talk to you real soon. Bye.
Family, family, bringing our worlds together. together.